الشيطان الرجيم قل يا عبادي الذين آمنوا اتقوا ربكم للذين أحسنوا في هذه الدنيا حسنة وأرض الله واسعة إنما يوفى الصابرون أجرهم بغير حساب قل إني أمرت أن أعبد الله مخلصا له الدين وأمرت لأن أكون أول المسلمين قل إني أخاف إن عصيت ربي عذاب يوم عظيم قل الله أعبد مخلصا له ديني فاعبدوا ما شئتم من دونه قل إن الخاسرين الذين خسروا أنفسهم وأهليهم يوم القيامة ألا ذلك هو الخسران المبين لهم من فوقهم ظلل من النار ومن تحتهم ظلل ذلك يخوف الله به عباده يا عباد فاتقون والذين اجتنبوا الطاغوت أن يعبدوها وأنابوا إلى الله لهم البشرى فبشر عباد صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah khairan ansar. Just to go over the Quran translation really quick. In the meaning of the translation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, say, O my servants who have believed, fear your Lord. For those who do good in this world is good, and the earth of Allah is spacious. Indeed, the patient will be given their reward without account. Say, O Muhammad, indeed I have been commanded to worship Allah, being sincere to Him in religion. And I have been commanded to be the first among you of the Muslims. Say, indeed I fear if I should disobey my Lord, the punishment of a tremendous day. Say, Allah alone do I worship, sincere to Him in my religion. So worship what you will besides Him. Say, indeed the losers are those who will lose themselves and their families on the day of resurrection. Unquestionably, that is the manifest lost. They will have canopies of fire above them, and below them canopies. By that Allah threatens His servants. O my servants, then fear me. But those who have avoided Taghut, lest they worship it and turn back to Allah, for them are good tidings. So give good tidings to my servants. Again, Jazakallah khairan ansar for the Quran recitation. And before we introduce our speaker, I'd like to present a student of the speaker, Brother Maz, to give us a little introduction about Mufti Siddiq.
Assalamu Mufti Muhammad Siddiq Mohiuddin is a dedicated scholar and leader originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He began his Islamic journey by memorizing the Quran under Qari Maman and continued his studies at Masjid Yasin in Dallas, Texas. He later enrolled at Dar es Salaam Seminary in Lombard, Illinois, where he graduated with honors in 2022 and received an ijazah in Al-Qira'at al-Ashara. Seeking deeper knowledge, he pursued advanced studies in fiqh at Darul Ifta Chicago under Mufti Abar Mirza, completing his Ifta program with his dissertation currently being published. Mufti Siddiq served as a part-time visiting scholar at ISNS before becoming the full-time imam. His work centers on delivering impactful lectures, guiding spiritual growth, and serving the community through knowledge and compassion. Mufti Siddiq has been an inspiring leader and mentor to the youth, community, and myself, helping us grow in our understanding of faith and Islamic values. Please welcome Mufti Siddiq.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. قال الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب زدني علما رب زدني علما رب زدني علما. I was requested to speak about the reasoning or the reason why we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why we believe in a creator, why we believe in a Rabb. There's a lot of different aspects to this topic that's better discussed and taught over a series or in a classroom setting rather than a one-off 45-minute lecture. But inshallah we'll try to address some base points just to get the discussion started, just to give some food for thought, inshallah. Now, different times, different places, different communities have different general trends and beliefs that are common amongst them. Where we live, the general tendency of belief, whether a person admits or accepts it as their identity or not, is that of agnosticism. I don't know if you guys know the difference between atheism and agnosticism. Agnosticism is A meaning not having, something in Greek, and the Gnostic comes from the Greek word for knowledge. And I don't know. Agnosticism means I don't know. Meaning I don't know if there's a God or not. I don't know. I don't have enough reason to believe in a God. That's what agnosticism means. Meaning, to put it into English, and you can't be sure. Right? Maybe there is a God, maybe there's not a God, but I don't have any reason to be sure. And that is the general thinking that permeates our communities and our societies. Whether the person claims to be Muslim, whether the person identifies as a Christian, whether the person identifies as a Jew, or whether they openly identify themselves as an agnostic or atheist, generally that's the line of thinking that permeates our culture and our society. Now, before I begin to address this topic, there's various different arguments that can be discussed for the existence of God, but I want to lay down a premise beforehand. The belief of agnosticism is a natural progression from the way we approach. Again, I'm going to use some words. I'll define them. If you guys don't understand a word, just like point it out, and I'll try to define it, inshallah. From our understanding of how we ascertain knowledge, how do we determine knowledge, epistemology. Right? The general epistemology that's accepted and adopted is one that is very heavily dependent on empirical sciences, empirical information, empirical data. And technically, this is an epistemology that is supposed to be relegated and constricted to the field of science, right? Because science is the discovery of trying to understand how the world works around us. And if you want to be able to make decisions about that, then you need empirical data to be able to come up with theories and have beliefs, full beliefs. But the reality is that this reliance on empirical data, you guys all understand empirical data as being the only valid source of information in practice is not restricted to the field of science, but rather it kind of permeates every single aspect of our life, our morality, the law, to the extent of our belief in God or the lack thereof. But to begin, I would challenge that premise. Right? See, a key source of information in a human being's life is their rational mind. Right? The rational mind is a key source of information. Whether you technically, on paper, accept it as a valid source of information or not, in practice, there's no escaping it. Right? So, for example, someone who says that I don't believe in a God, prove to me that God doesn't exist. Why don't I believe in a God? Because I can't see God, I can't hear God, I can't talk to God, so therefore God doesn't exist. What is wrong with that statement? Yeah.
There's other things that you might not be able to see or feel or interact with, but it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's only. But what's wrong with the argument itself? Saying that I don't believe in rationality, what is the problem with saying I don't believe in rationality?
You're kind of like, everyone uses rationality.
Yes.
So you're kind of refuting yourself.
Exactly. The argument is a self-defeating. That's a self-defeating statement. That statement itself is using rationality. You cannot say I don't accept rationality without using rationality. You're using rationality too. Say I don't believe in rationality because that's a rational statement. It's a rational statement to say I don't believe in rationality. You can't rationality can't be put under a microscope. You can't see rationality. You can't measure rationality. You can't hear rationality. Rationality exists. It's something that is beyond the realm of empiricism. So just to say I don't believe in rationality is a self-defeating statement. And we can demonstrate that a little bit, right? I have kids, I have small kids. If I take my son, take this water bottle, he's looking that way, and I throw it over his head and it lands in front of him. And his empirical information that his brain receives tells him that this water bottle appeared right here and it landed over there. But his rational mind tells him that the water bottle didn't come out from right above me. It came from somewhere else. It started from somewhere behind. And I've tried this with him, and I want to just keep this in just books. So if you throw something over a child's head, they look back to see where it came from. Very small. This is before he could even talk, a few months old. So the fact is that intuitively, naturally, we all believe in rationality as a valid source of information. We are not restricted. There is no way to go about life believing in only empirical information. Right? For example, you look at something and you say, that's beautiful. The concept of beauty is a rational concept. Something cannot be, we can come up with a theory that something is balanced, then people perceive it as beautiful. But that's not necessarily the case. Some cultures, for example, they say if you have a long neck, then that's considered beauty. The whole concept of beauty is not it's not empirical. It's something that's metaphysical. It's beyond the physical realm. If person has hate, person feels love, person feels anger. All these emotions, these important parts of what makes us who we are beyond the material world. Right? There is nothing material about anger. There's nothing material about love. Those are things that are beyond the material realm. So the fact of the matter is that we are, in Islam, we call that fitrah. It's in our nature. It's in our innate, intuitive nature to believe in things beyond the physical realm. Okay, so Islam, as a Muslim, we believe in the physical realm and we believe in things beyond the physical realm as well, the metaphysics. And the belief in metaphysics isn't restricted to just Islam from also. The belief in metaphysics transcends cultures, transcends societies. It has always been a part of human society, part of human psyche, across the world, across cultures. It's always been the case. And that's why, let me paint a scenario for you. Let's say you go to your friend's house, okay? And you guys are having dinner, lunch, and your friend says that, how do you know that what you did yesterday, it actually happened? How do you know it actually happened? How do you know that, you went to school yesterday? What if it was just a dream? What if you didn't go to school? A rational person, someone who's intelligent, will be like, that's ridiculous. You don't start, trying to prove that, actually I went to school. Why? Because that's an absurd question. It's intuitive. We intuitively believe that things are real. If someone believes that nothing is real, then there's no arguing with that person. Because in order to have any sort of knowledge, any sort of discussion, there are some things that are baseline that you have to accept, right? As reality. Otherwise, there's no point of having any conversation. There's no point of anything. You might as well just sit and be a vegetable until you die. And so there's some intuitive truths that every person has to accept, has to believe, to proceed forward in life. Otherwise, life is pointless, life is meaningless. And there's no point of having discovered Islam Week, there's no point of going to UIC and getting education, there's no point of getting a job, there's no point of absolutely anything. So these things, belief in rationality is kind of like one of those intuitive beliefs that a human being has. That everyone intuitively believes in rationality. So now, that's what I wanted to kind of highlight here. Again, this is it's kind of difficult to have this conversation because it's more of a classroom setting where one thing has to be built off the next thing, which has to be built off the next thing, and you have to go through things progressively. And then in a lecture, that's not how it kind of works. So I'm just trying to build some basic premises, inshallah, moving forward. And if this talk is really boring, then that's not my fault. You guys can blame Maz and the organizers because they gave me a boring topic. But anyways, so that the premise is that we believe in rationality and we believe in things that exist beyond the physical realm. That's just human nature, and there's no two ways about it. Now the argument that Quran uses a lot and is one of the strongest arguments for the existence of God, the name that's given to that argument is the argument of contingency. Right? And that's the surah that I just read before you. Every single person memorizes this surah, one of the first surahs that everyone memorizes. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Any Muslim child, you stop and ask him, read Surah Ikhlas, they'll read this surah. And this is one of the strongest arguments and most recurring argument in the Quran that Allah uses all the time. What does, can anyone translate that? Yeah.
Translate Surah
Ikhlas.
Allah Ahad, say He is one. Allah Samad, He is the ultimate refuge. Lam yalid wa lam yulad, He is not beget or He is not begotten. And there's nothing like Him.
Yeah. So now, the part that I want to focus on today is Allah Samad. And that is the main quality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala attributes to Himself in this ayah. And say Allah is one and Allah is As-Samad. Now there's different ways to translate As-Samad, but none of those translations really capture what As-Samad means. As-Samad is a being who is completely self-sufficient, completely independent, and such that everything else is dependent on that being. And that is, in just the contingency argument. And again, this contingency argument is very, very intuitive, and a person accepts this and believes this from childhood, right? If you talk to a young child, right, and you ask the child, why is the sky blue? Why are the leaves green? Why does this happen? Why does that happen? No matter what explanation you give that child, the child will not be satisfied until you tell the child, oh, then God made it that way. If you don't believe in God, then you'll just say that it is what it is. But the child accepts and believes that these things originated from some point. There's a point of origination. That all these things are dependent on some being, and everything has to go back to that being. As long as you tie all the whys back to that being, it makes perfect sense to the kid. Right? If you give individual reasons, then the child will keep asking you, why is that? Oh, why is that? Why is that? Until it ties back to a single point of origination. Whatever you want to call that single point of origination. You want to call it God, you want to call it someone else, someone who's agnostic will give some other reason, you'll understand later, but it has to come back to a single point. Now, one might say that, a child believes in, it makes sense to a child that God made things that way, that everything is contingent and dependent on a God. That's just because the child didn't go to science class yet, he didn't study physics, he didn't study cosmology, he didn't study all these things. And once he goes to college and he studies science, then he'll understand. Or, the other way to look at it is that really the child just hasn't been influenced to uphold certain biased beliefs as of yet. The child is still in its pure form. hasn't been influenced yet. And really, the child's understanding, that's why I say that the belief in God is very intuitive. Once we kind of unpack it a little bit, inshallah, it'll make sense. And you see that the child's belief that, everything has to go back to a single point makes a lot of sense. As rational, we continue to hold that belief subconsciously throughout our life. In order to demonstrate the argument of contingency, let's say there is a person that's leaning on something. Because if I lean, I'll just fall back, right? But it's leaning on another person. The other person is leaning on another person. And you have a whole row of people leaning on each other, right? Tilted like this. And you keep seeing, as far as I can see, you just have a line of people leaning on each other. And so far back that they disappear into the horizon. One on top of another, they're all leaning on each other, leaning on each other, leaning on each other. What would you say? What would you conclude from that statement? Yeah.
Someone holding them up.
Someone holding them up? Yeah. That's what other possibilities are there? Yeah, that's a possibility. But the globe will come back. That can be infinite, right? Infinite is infinitely they're leaning on each other. Or the other possibility is that they're all dependent on one point. That something is there holding all of this up, right? A is dependent on B, B is dependent on C, C is dependent on D. But there has to be some endpoint that is not dependent on anything else. Because if there was nothing that was holding them up, what would happen? What would be the case? What would happen to them if nothing's holding them up? That last person. They'd all be laying down. Right? They'd all be laying down on the ground, they'd all fall down. So it's completely irrational, completely illogical to believe that infinitely they're contingent on something else. It's just a complete absurdity. There has to be a point, there has to be something that they are all dependent upon, and it's not dependent on something else. There's something that has to be holding them up. And I don't know, do you guys even study logic and stuff in college anymore? Liberal arts, they're joking on.
You're a philosophy major.
Yeah, that's unfortunately liberal arts have been become a joke. But if you study logic, right? There's something called a deductive argument, right? Deductive argument, and this concept of a deductive argument is used in science, it's used in mathematics as well. But the whole study of logic is the study of understanding how arguments work and how we structure our thoughts and build arguments and gain new knowledge from existing knowledge. That's the whole point of studying logic. Which, that's why it's so absurd that we don't study logic. So a deductive argument is an argument that there's a premise 1, the premise 2, and there is a conclusion. And the conclusion must follow from the premise 1 and premise 2. Okay, let me give you an example. I am a human being. All human beings must die. So what? I must die. If you accept that all human beings die, and if you believe that I am a human being, then you have to accept that I'll die. There's no other way about it. If you accept premise 1, if you accept premise 2, the conclusion must be true. Now, that's a valid argument, logically, it's a sound argument. But now, if you want to disagree with something, then you have to prove that either the premise 1 is incorrect, or premise 2 is incorrect. Because you can use false premises and still come to a valid conclusion based on the premises, but the premise can be false. Let me give you an example. I can say that all cats are pink, lions are cats, therefore lions are pink. But it's a sound argument, but is it a true argument? No, it's not true. Why? What's wrong about it?
No cats are pink.
Yeah, all cats are pink is a incorrect statement. It's not valid. It's untrue. Therefore, the conclusion is untrue. So if the point is that if in a logical argument, if you want to defeat the logical argument, you have to disprove either premise A or Premise B. If you accept premise A and if you accept premise B, then you have to accept the conclusion. So now the contingency argument says that the entire universe is contingent, and the existence of contingent things requires something that is independent, right? Non-contingent. Therefore, the universe requires a non-contingent being. That's the argument. So now you have to either disprove premise A that the universe is not contingent, but that's like a scientifically accepted fact that the universe is contingent. For example, you say, okay, why does the sun shine? Why does the sun shine? You can explain that. Oh, well, like nuclear fission happens. Hydrogen atoms, they fuse and become helium atoms, and it creates energy, and the whole explanation. That's why it happens. But why do atoms behave in a certain way? Then you have to dig a little bit deeper. Why does that happen? The entire universe is contingent. That's just a scientifically accepted fact. If you believe that the universe is contingent, and logically you must accept that contingent beings require something that's non-contingent, then you have to also accept that the universe requires a non-contingent being, which we believe is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's just one argument from a whole host of arguments, but that's not what I want to restrict it to. That's just an example that was given. The point is that Islam and the beliefs of Islam are very logical beliefs. Everything that we believe, it makes sense. And Islam is not contrary to science and scientific beliefs and scientific progress either. So, the point, and before we move forward, I'll point out one other thing. That there's two aspects to believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and having that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This one aspect of our belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this logical argument where we can sit and think and rationalize that is there a God, is there not a God, and have arguments for and against. The other relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a personal spiritual relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Having that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And both of these aspects are extremely crucial and extremely important. The reality is that although rational arguments have their place and they're necessary in order to uphold and defend and rationalize our religion, the more important relationship to have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that personal relationship with Allah Azza wa Jalla. And the belief that comes from that personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is far stronger than the belief that can come from any rational argument. Because the reality is we're emotional beings. We have certain emotional needs, and those emotional needs are only fulfilled by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah who is Kareem, Allah who is merciful, Allah who is Rahim, Allah who is forgiving. That is a very, very important thing. And then let's paint a scenario of what life looks like without a belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a belief in God. When a loved one passes away, right, when a loved one passes away, someone loses their mother, someone loses their sibling. The belief in a God, the belief in hereafter, please, is the only thing that can give that person consolation at that time. If you don't believe in a God, you don't believe in hereafter, that's it. That person is forever, eternally gone, never to come back. They'll just turn back to something else, and that's it. It's over. And this lack of belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, lack of connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, lack of spirituality, it is a very, very, very difficult thing to live with, practically speaking. Life becomes extremely difficult. That's why you see a lot of professors and like famous atheists that argue for atheism and this and that. Towards the end of their life, they have a very, very, very sad, depressing outlook on life. And that's the consequence of cutting yourself off from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the spiritual need that a human being has. Because a human being, like I said, that we believe in metaphysics, a human being is more than just matter. A human being is more than just matter. And if you restrict a human being to only cold, hard matter and nothing else, then life also becomes cold, hard, and depressing. There is no warmth, there is no hope, there's nothing. And that is so important, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, although Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses logical arguments in the Quran to get us to think, most of the time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appeals to a person's emotions. And like implores a person to think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because that connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that spirituality, it allows you to navigate the challenges and difficulties of life, maintaining a positive outlook on life, and maintaining your sanity. And that is so important, and that becomes so difficult in a purely materialistic world. When you live in a materialistic environment, that becomes very difficult. It eats away at your spirituality, and it makes you hollow. And the important thing is, that's kind of what I want to mention at the beginning of Discover Islam. Islam shouldn't be relegated to just cold hard arguments. Those are there, they have their place. If they're needed, they can be referred back to. And it's important to study them as well. But the more important aspect of Islam, the one that is more relevant to everyone's daily life, the one that ultimately, whether you reject it now or not, ultimately it makes sense and it hits home, is that spiritual connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That life-giving belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And nurturing that and protecting that is so vital and important. Because without it, society and a person, they devolve into complete chaos. That's why you see, for example, in our societies, in our community, depression is so high, suicide is so high. People have all the means of happiness, right? The luxuries that we have, the medical practices that are available, what is available to us as a community, perhaps was unavailable to anyone before us. So what is missing, that we have all these ingredients that should make us happy, yet our communities and our societies are so unhappy. And that missing ingredient is this spiritual belief in that, this connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that becomes a life-giving source that allows you to really attain happiness, to allow you to have a purpose. Because that's the other thing, and inshallah we'll conclude with this and then I'll open up for questions if you have any questions. Without a belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's the other very important thing that becomes missing, that what is the purpose of your life? Right? If you don't believe in God and you believe that the purpose of your life is to be as happy as possible, then we've created all these means of happiness and ease and luxury for ourselves, yet happiness seems unattainable. So then what is the source of happiness? How do we feel fulfilled in our life? How do we live a life of satisfaction, of contentment? Material things can't be the answer because we have them and yet we're not happy. Right? How is it that a person can live in a first world country and have all the luxuries available to them and get happy, and a child who's born in a third world country barely has food to eat, doesn't have clean drinking water, can be happy and satisfied? If material things were the source of happiness, then the richer you are, the more means you have, you should be the most happy. And if you're poor, you should be the most unhappy. But that's not what we see in the world around us. So what is the source of happiness? What is the source of contentment? The source of contentment comes from having a life of purpose and being able to fulfill that purpose. When a person is purpose driven and they're able to fulfill that, then they feel content and happy and satisfied with themselves. And if you believe that there is nothing in this world besides cold hard matter, there is no God, there is no purpose, we're just here, then imagine how can you be happy? Let me give you an example. If you were to wake up one day and you're in a completely enclosed room, stone room, there's stone walls, stone ceiling, stone roof, you just locked in this box. Now there's no purpose to your life, that's it, that's all there is. There's nothing outside the stone walls, there's nothing inside the stone walls, that's it, this is your life. That's essentially what you're relegating life to if you don't believe in a metaphysical realm, you don't believe in a God, you don't believe in a higher purpose, you don't believe in anything, then that's all there is. We're just sitting on this little globe in the middle of this vast universe, spinning around the sun aimlessly, and then one day it'll all end. And although a lot of people don't take time to think about life in that sense until something happens that forces them to think about it, whether you put time to think about that or not, the reality of that is always at the back of your subconscious mind. And that leads to very that leads to depression. How can you not be depressed thinking that I'm just here and I have no purpose? I'm just matter. Just like this table is a bunch of atoms put together, and this computer is a bunch of atoms put together, and this microphone is a bunch of atoms. I'm also just a bunch of atoms that are just aimlessly floating around. What is the point? Why should I strive? Why should I work hard? Why should I get a career? Why should I get a family? Why should I go through hardship? If anything difficult happens, why should I keep pushing forward? Ultimately, I'm just gonna die anyways, and everything will end anyways. And that, it becomes very, very difficult to deal with. And that's the phenomenon that we see that kind of unfolding as the secular society that is materialistic evolves, is that people are beginning to get this void of spirituality. And unfortunately, that void is being filled up by random things like, random spiritual beliefs. And people believe in you know the type of people I'm talking about, right? Like people that seek out spirituality from things that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, society that's completely absurd. Random, connecting with nature in weird ways, becoming one with nature. Weird things that people do that if you really talk to them, they will also be like, it doesn't really fully make sense. But the point is that people are becoming desperate to fill that spiritual void with something, some sorts of spirituality. And we're so blessed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us a religion that allows us to be rational and engage in the world in a rational way. And science is a very legitimate science in the scope of Islam, right? Because what science studies the universe around you, allows you to do certain things with nature, understand how the world works, and that's very beneficial. And it's completely acceptable and rewarding to engage in that, to understand the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Islam is not contrarian to science at all. So Islam allows you to have this avenue and this channel for scientific, and that's why Allah didn't give us all the scientific answers, because Allah gave us a space in the room to have that curiosity and discover the world around us. That's a human need, and Allah facilitated that in Islam. But at the same time, Allah also created this avenue to fulfill our spiritual needs of connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the real answer to the problem that people face around us, the communities around us, lies in Islam. We face that problem, and everyone around us faces that problem as well. But the important thing is that we as people have to learn our own religion. We as Muslims have to learn our religion to a degree that we're able to first implement that and reap the benefits of Islam in our own life, and learn it enough and practice it enough to be able to propagate that and demonstrate the utility of Islam to the people around us as well. We as Muslims have to create a positive impact in our communities and demonstrate what Islam is, not just talk about it, words are cheap, right? Actions are meaningful. When you live something, that is more meaningful. We have to be able to live Islam, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have that understanding and have that practice as well. And I know, like I said, this is a very important topic.